The last couple of weeks I've been talking about courage. Last week we talked about discourage. I just thought last week's message was so fantastic. Didn't Eric Blanton do a great job giving his testimony? And there were so many people who emailed me and said, hey, Pastor Ty, that was so great. I loved that. It was so cool. But let me just kind of tell you that for the next week, it has a lot to do with what happens this week. And I want to tell you a story. And this story is real. And this story is one of the most incredible Old Testament stories. Your Bible is made up in 3 parts. It's made up of foundational truths, and faith-filled stories. Okay? If you look throughout Scripture, you're going to find foundational truths, and faith-filled stories. The story I'm going to tell you tonight is a faith-filled story. It's a story that starts off with drama. It starts off with the lack, just kind of taking a look at this person and going, what would God ever want to use that person for? And then you begin to see that there's something deeper there. As a pastor, I want you to know why this story is so important to me. There is so much more to you than what meets the eye. As a pastor, I want you to know that I think about you, I dream for you, I pray for you, and sometimes I wish I could grab you by the collar and say, I wish you could see what Jesus sees in you. I see that God's not done with your story yet, but sometimes I just want to look you in the eyes and I want to say, I wish you would quit believing the lie. And I wish you could see what Jesus sees in you. And then there's others that you're like really arrogant and it's like, I wish I could say, no, I need you to see how humble we need to be before Jesus, okay? But I wish with all of my heart that you could see what Jesus sees in you. And that's why tonight I want to take this story. And next week we're going to add to it. Next week we're going to look at a New Testament principle based on today's message. But today, I would like to tell you the story of Esther. So if you have your Bibles, turn to Esther, and you can kind of go along. I've changed it a lot since yesterday, but I would like to give the punchline at the very beginning. And can I turn to you and say, what makes this story so awesome is that Esther ends up saving all of her people's lives. Okay? If you've never read the story of Esther, I'm giving you the punchline at the end. Esther ends up saving all of her family. Esther ends up saving her people. Esther ends up saving the children of God. Esther ends up being the key ingredient that stops a murder and rescues a bunch of people. And the bad guy is captured and everybody gets to go on to the next story of what God's plan is for his people. Esther does the right thing. But we got to tell the story real quick. I could jump to the punchline, but there's so much about Esther's story that I want you to pay attention to. If you've never heard the story of Esther, it's found in the Old Testament. You can read it when you get home. It's really cool, but there's a lot of names in it that I'm just going to butcher. So I'm going to give you the short version. Welcome to the Cliff Notes of Esther tonight. Are y'all ready for this? Okay. I'm going to break this down into scenes. Just like you would look at a movie and know the different scenes in the story. And let me start off with scene number 1. Scene number 1 takes place with a king and a queen who aren't necessarily getting along. This is not Queen Esther, this is Queen Vashti. And the king, you all are familiar with him. He would be King Artaxerxes, and he's got a lot of names. He's got all Ahasuerus, King Artaxerxes. He is so royal that he's got so many names, okay? Maybe if you watch some movies, remember the movie 300? Where the guy that's the bad guy in the movie, King Artaxerxes, this is the guy we're talking about. He's evil, he's awful, but he's in the story. And what is going on is God's people have been conquered. It's not that God let them down. It's that they rebelled against God and they left God, which got them into all kinds of trouble. Okay? So now they are subject to King Artaxerxes. King Artaxerxes is now married to the queen, and Queen Vashti is asked to do something one night. The night is the 7th day of a 7-day party. They've been partying for 7 days solid, and you can tell the queen's just sick of it. She's sick of the immaturity and the drunkenness, and she's tired of the way her king's been acting. And on the 7th night, the king thinks it's a good idea to parade the queen's beauty in front of everyone. So he gets up and he goes, "Somebody get me the queen." Okay, like he really does. "Somebody get me the queen." And so someone runs in and says, "The king wants you to come down, and he wants you to dress up pretty, and wants you to put on some lipstick, and he wants to put the royal crown on your head, and he wants you to walk out and let all of these drunk pigs take a look at you." And she refused to come out. She's not going to do it. And she tells the king, who never hears no, no. In fact, this story has a lot of little one-liners, little things that you have to stop and think about. And let's just say something we can learn from the king at this point. You ready? Gentlemen, don't ever do anything until you ask your wife first. Okay? And all the ladies said? Okay, yeah. And see, I want to make sure. He should have never asked her. He should have just enjoyed his buddies, had a great time, but never asked her to embarrass herself. Not flaunt herself. This story from the very beginning, I just want to set the stage in this. I don't like how it starts. I don't like how it is. I don't like what happens next. Don't get mad at me if at any point in this story you're thinking, "Why are we reading this story in church?" But there's a very good reason why. And I just want to start off and show you just how stupid people can be. They can embarrass their wives. They can embarrass their husbands. They can embarrass their kids. And this story starts off with embarrassment, and they separate because she's not going to come out, and he wants her to, and you don't tell the king no. Now, this really shakes the kingdom. And the reason why it shakes the kingdom is because now people begin to talk. And the key leaders of those days would come to the king and say, "You've got to banish her. Because what if the other girls in our community begin to get the idea that we can start saying no to things? What if wives begin to turn to their husbands and say, 'Well, Queen Vashti said no. Why can't I say no?'" And no joke, read it in your Bible. And they go into a panic because they think what she just did is going to cause complete anarchy in the kingdom, and women are going to begin to rise up. Now, this is ridiculous. It's one of these sad things that find us in this moment to where we think, "Gosh, can people really be this bad?" It gets worse. It gets worse. Queen Vashti is now banished to a little spot of land where she can just kind of live out her days. And the king starts getting lonely. King Artaxerxes just starts thinking about, "I'm missing her. Gosh, she's so pretty, and we didn't have a great marriage, but I miss her." And somebody in the king court said, "Oh, no, we can't let this happen. Oh my gosh, we cannot let the king go back. We can't let his heart go back to the queen." And so he comes up with this great idea. You want to hear the great idea? Let's just go get a bunch of other women, cute girls, and bring them in and let the king pick whoever he wants for the next king. I didn't say this was a great story at the beginning. It's just a story, and everybody's got to start somewhere. And here this guy says, "King, I've got a great idea. What if we just kind of picked the prettiest girls in the kingdom? We brought them in, and then without a little bit of time, we'll get them shining up. We'll get them looking good. You can pick who your next queen's going to be." And the king said, "No, I'm a faithful man. I love my wife. I could never do that to her." No. He turns and says, "Well, whatever I got to do for the kingdom. Whatever I got to do to make this place a better place. Throw me in, boys. Throw me in that briar patch." And so the big procession takes place. The beauty pageant is prepared. And girls are picked from all over the country to just be pretty. No talent necessary. No skills. Just be pretty. And the king goes with it. And the kingdom goes for it. And the king's excited because he's going to get a new wife, and she's going to be young, and she's going to be beautiful. And I want to stop right here. We're not even at the part I want to preach on yet. But there's things that we have to stop, because somebody in this room at some point has been taught that you are just another pretty face. Maybe at work you feel like just another pretty face. Maybe in life you feel like another pretty face. Maybe you even are going towards the side of saying, I'm not another pretty face. In fact, there's people prettier than me. Why does everybody else keep picking the pretty ones? What's going to happen with my life, God? What's going to happen with my life? Can I turn to you saying what makes this story so incredible is one of these points. Not everyone's courageous moments come from other people's good choices. I want you to get this. Not everybody's courageous moment. That means your courageous moment and my courageous moment. You know how it works out in my head? In my head, I think my courageous moment is going to be built on other people's courageous moments. It's like, here's a courageous moment, here's a courageous moment, here's a courageous moment, and come on, Ty, now you put the cherry on top. I haven't had one moment like this. It's generally from hard situations, tough choices, deep prayerful nights, knowing this could fail, but knowing it's God who's called me to do it. It's never easy. And I know a lot of people, they're in a lot of situations right now. It's never going to be perfect to be courageous. I'll say it again. It's never going to be perfect to obey God. It's never going to be perfect to be a fully devoted follower of Christ. And not everyone's courageous moments, yours and mine, come from other people's good choices. And that's what we find in this story. Another thing about this is this sets the scene of why Esther's courage was such an unusual courage. Because at this point, she is just another pretty face. But I want to point something out real quick before we get the meat of this. Here's another point. Your decisions are based on who you really are. You're going to understand this more in a minute. If you're taking notes, and I hope you are, I hope you write this down. I hope tonight when you're thinking about our story, you go back and you go, oh, there was one point that Ty kind of let out. We didn't understand what he was talking about. But now I see how it applies to the Esther story. Your decisions, my decisions, our decisions are based on who we, you and me, really are. One of the things I'm going to say here in a minute, I don't want you to get bored with me saying it. Are you just a beauty queen? And I hope tonight we stir and realize that all of us start somewhere, even if it is a beauty queen. But your decisions are based on who you really are. Okay? So, I'm going to keep going. We're going to go to scene 3. Are you ready? Scene 3. It's called the beauty queen scene. Here we go. All of these beauty queens are let in. And each one of them are hand-picked. They're given different things and they're offered different things. The best food, the best wine, the best showers, the best beds. They are given everything they needed because for a certain amount of time, they are going to be prepared so that they will be at their best when they're led before the king. Now, I could easily keep jumping, but there's something really important here. There's a eunuch who's in charge of all the queens. If you don't know what a eunuch is, don't look it up because you may want to ask your buddy, okay? Ask your wife or ask your pastor after church, okay? And this guy's in charge of everybody. He's big. He's in charge. He takes no guff. He tells the girls what to do and how to do it. He's been given one job and one job only, to protect them, but to make sure that they're doing exactly what they're told to do. This is a guy ruling the little concubine community. And he's got one job. Now this is the guy who tells them when to get up in the morning and go to bed at night. And I would like to read you the story about what takes place between her and him. Now the young woman pleased him, Haggai the eunuch. And she, this is very important, is talking about the young woman being our heroine, okay? Esther. And she obtained his, what does it say? Favor. Favor is a very important thing. In fact, it's something that you want and it's something that I want. But how do you get it? And remember, not all of our situations are perfect situations. But even in the most imperfect situations, God always gives an avenue for favor to be found. And she pleased the eunuch, and she obtained his favor, which means she was easy to work with. So he readily gave beauty preparations to her, besides her allowance. Then 7 choice maidservants were provided for her from the king's palace, and he moved her and her maidservants to the best places in the house of the woman. This isn't even the story yet, but it's something you got to learn, that even in the worst situations, God is saying a few things. And one of the things that he's saying in this portion right here is, how well do you make friends? Everybody gripes. Everybody complains. But have you ever noticed that it is so much easier to catch flies with sugar instead of vinegar? And if your mama didn't teach you that, you should stop and realize that for some of us, if we were thrown in this situation, we'd hunker down and we wouldn't move a bit and we wouldn't do a thing and we'd be mad at God. But do you realize that God might have you in a situation for a very important reason? And even a beauty queen could be tossed into a situation because there's something bigger going on. And you need to trust what God's doing because you don't even know what's happening behind the scenes. But he's got you here for a reason. And someone taught her, and I believe we're going to find out here in a minute who taught her, that even in the hardest situations, you have an opportunity to at least make friends. Because when you have the ability of making friends, and it says here that she pleased him and she obtained favor. And I truly believe in my heart, if you read this, it means that the guy had to get up young ladies every morning and get them to where they needed to be on time. Can you imagine how hard that job was? He had to tell them, I need you to eat this food. I need you to do this. Girls, I need you to go to bed at this time every night. What if she just simply said, what time do you need me up? And he said, I'm trying to get the girls at the front door at 8 o'clock every morning. And she set her alarm, her rooster, to go off every morning to get up at a time to where she could be standing where he needed her to be standing at 7:50 every morning so that at 8 o'clock she was ready to go. And it made his job so much easier. Can you remember, you're either going to cause people to dislike you or to love you. And it's not necessarily their decision. It could be something as simple as you just being likable. I wish I could turn to some people and say, you know what would help you find a job? If you were actually likable. You know what would help you find a guy? Okay, I'm going to leave that one alone. You know what would help you? You battle loneliness. You're lonely. You're frustrated. You don't know why people don't, where's friends? Everybody else has friends. You know what the Bible says about making friends? Be friendly. This is just a free one. And I think it's one of these things you have to stop and realize. This point is really important. Your attitude does not have to reflect your situation. Your attitude in life does not have to reflect the situation, which means you could be going through a horrible situation, but your attitude and your faith could tell you God's not done with this story yet. 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 How am I doing so far? We're on scene 3. There's scene 6. I'm going to go to scene 4. Scene 4, the whole story keeps going. The king loved Esther more than all the other women. So they're led in front of him. And he goes, dang, when Esther walks in. Now, can you imagine? If you were the king and you knew the girls were coming and the eunuch has been in charge of everyone and she found favor with the eunuch and the eunuch's sitting there like this and the king's like tugging his shirt like this. Is there any pretty ones? Well, yes, sir, they're all pretty. Is there any ones you like? There's one that I think is pretty incredible. Okay, which one is she? It's Esther, sir. And all of a sudden, the king sees her for the first time. And it says, the king loved Esther more than all the other women. And she obtained grace and favor in his sight more than all the other virgins. So he set the royal crown upon her head and made her queen instead of Vashti. Esther's a pretty amazing little girl. She goes from a nobody to a queen. But can I turn to you and say, this is a pretty shallow story up until this point. If you're in the room and you're like, I want to be queen someday, then you miss the whole point. This is just the introduction, okay? God didn't call us to be kings, and God didn't call us to be queens in the worldly sense. That is like the most shallow thing in the world. If you're here and you're like, oh man, this just gives me hope. I need to go find me a eunuch, and I need to be nice to him, and I need to make friends, and they're going to crown me queen someday, or they're going to crown me king someday. You missed it, man. The reason that I wanted to show you all these things is because I wanted you to see the backstory for the real story. But I wanted to ask you a question again. Here's this beauty queen, and that's all she is. It's the most shallow story in the world. It's a Barbie story. It's a beauty pageant. She's named queen for no other reason. There's no depth. There's no education. There's no smarts. She's just pretty. But here's the question that has to come up. Are you just another pretty face? Have you been somebody that graduated high school, made a bunch of money, and you're just another pretty face? Are you somebody that inherited a piece of property and now you're just another pretty face? Maybe you actually are a pretty face and you're just another pretty face. Can I tell you that as a pastor, there is this pull to be a pastor that's just another pretty face pastor. And it bothers me all the time. Can I tell you some of the things that bother me about me? Y'all don't know this, but my eyes, I struggle with my eyes. I'm blind in one and can't see out of the other. Y'all should have seen me yesterday trying to preach this message, not being able to read my notes. I have these reading glasses that I have to put over my nose, and I have to do double glasses just to read. I know a lot of y'all do the same thing. And you know what gets me? Furtick doesn't wear glasses. Furtick doesn't wear glasses. And I have to wear these stinking bulletproof glasses, and I can't even read out of them. LASIK surgery messed me up in my right eye, and it just bothers me. I know y'all are thinking this is shallow. We're all shallow. That's the point of this story. We're all wanting to be beauty queens. Furtick doesn't wear glasses. I shouldn't wear glasses either. Do y'all notice I stutter more than I've ever stuttered before in my life? I don't know why. We've gone to the doctors. We've tried to figure out why. They think it's stress, so it's y'all's fault. And I've just kind of gotten to the point to where it's like, hey, you know what? It is what it is. If Mel Tellis can make millions of dollars, I can preach stuttering. And see, nobody else got that joke. Only the Monday night got that joke. That's funny. That's funny. Only people laughed tonight. Yesterday it was crickets. The reality is, there's a lot of beauty queen stuff. But that's not what this story is about. But there is a question. Are you just another pretty face? Let's get to the meat and potatoes of this. Because scene 5 really begins to unpack something awesome. It says, in those days, while Mordecai sat within the king's gates. Mordecai was an amazing guy. Mordecai might be the hero in this story. Mordecai is the guy that has adopted Esther. Esther, our queen, she had no mother. And she had no father. She was an orphan. She was adopted by her cousin Mordecai. He raised her. He taught her. He taught her about the things of God and the heart of God. And Mordecai cared for her like his actual daughter. In his eyes, this is my daughter. And it says that Mordecai sat within the king's gates. 2 of the king's eunuchs, he sat outside the gates, and he just listened to see how Esther was doing inside. And if he could do anything to help her, he did help her. But one day, instead of him hearing how Esther was doing, he overheard 2 men talking about killing the king. And it says, the doorkeepers became furious and sought to lay hands on the king Assuerus, which is the one that we're talking about. And it says, so the matter became known to Mordecai. He overheard this. He eavesdropped. And he told Queen Esther. And Queen Esther informed the king. And when an inquiry was made into this matter, it was confirmed, and both were hanged in a gallows. And this is an important part. It was written, this whole story of Mordecai, written in the book of Chronicles in the presence of the king. The reason why I want to show you this is because now something begins to happen in the story. Please don't get bored at this point. I've got plenty of time. I'm going to get us out completely on time. But remember, this is just a beauty pageant at this point. But one of the things I said at the very beginning, Esther ends up saving her loved ones and people's life. And what nobody knows is a threat on God's people. All of them, all of the Jews are about to be annihilated. Everyone's on death row. But God is the only one who knows about it. And the only one who can get to the heart of the king is this little beauty pageant queen, who happens to have an adopted father who's her cousin named Mordecai. And Mordecai cares about her with all of his heart. So much so that every day he would walk outside the king's palace to see if he can hear how his adopted daughter's doing. And one day he hears of an assassination plot. And it was such a big deal, they opened up a book of Chronicles that writes down everything that happens in the day and puts down the story of how Mordecai saved the day. This is a key part because God uses this in the future story. Because scene 6 unfolds now, and this is the last and final one. A man by the name of Haman. Everybody say, boo. Haman has a conspiracy against the Jews. And here's how it happened. Haman is a pretty big political leader. This is where the whole story of Esther really comes down to this one crucial question. Are you just another beauty queen? And Haman gets promoted. And the king thought it'd be a good idea for everybody to come and let's celebrate Haman's big day. He's been great for our community. He's led in a great way. He's made things happen. He's put Dippin' Dots on the corner. He's made sure Chick-fil-A got here. There's been some great stuff. Roses wouldn't have got here without Haman. So let's give it up for Haman. Haman is so awesome. Let's give it up for Haman. So they have Haman Day. It's called Haman Palooza. Okay? And so everybody shows up for Haman Palooza. And one of the things the king does is the king says, okay, Haman, what would you like? And Haman said, I'd like for everybody to bow to me. And king said, that's a great idea. Attention, everyone, if you would. Let's all take a moment, just for a second. Let's bow our knee down to Haman right now. You ready? Let's give it up. 1, 2, 3, go. And the entire community bows their knee to Haman except for one man. And his name is Mordecai. Remember him? The dad? The adopted father? And it's nothing personal. He's like saying, Haman, it's nothing personal. You just got to know I'm Jewish. I'm Jewish. And Jews, we don't bow to anybody. I mean, this is a long lineage of we don't bow. We got Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. We got Daniel. And I'm just another guy, but I can just say, I'm glad it's Haman Palooza Day. I think Chick-fil-A, it rocks. Thanks for being here. All these things. Haman, thank you. But I can't bow, even for nice guys like you. And Haman gets furious. He's so angry. It said, after these 3 kings, Ashur's promoted Haman, the son of this guy, the Haggite, and advanced him and set his seat above all the princes who were with him. And all the king's servants who were within the king's gates bowed and paid homage to Haman. So for the king he had commanded concerning him, but Mordecai would not bow or pay homage. And it says this, when Haman saw that Mordecai did not bow or pay him homage, Haman was filled with wrath. And just how evil was this? He went to the king and he said, there's a plot to kill you against the Jews. The Jews hate you. And the king was like, the Jews? Who's the Jews? I can't remember how many people I've captured. Are there really Jewish people? He says, yes, they're horrible people. And he says, and the letters were sent by couriers into all the king's provinces to destroy, to kill, and to annihilate all of the Jews. Do you hear this? All of a sudden, Haman's so furious. He's convinced the king we should kill all the Jews, but it gets worse. Both young and old, little children, and women. And we're going to do it all in one day. Everyone's going to grab a sword. Everyone's going to grab a spear. And all of them are going to be wiped out in one day. On the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month of Adar, and to plunder their possessions. Guys, this is now no longer a beauty contest. This is now no longer a beauty contest. This is a moment to where all of a sudden we find ourselves in a life or death situation. And our Esther, she is not another pretty face. Yeah. Mordecai goes to Queen Esther. And he goes and he says, you've got to go talk to the king. Now remember, this is the king who wouldn't put up with a no from his last queen. And he set into standard that no one comes to me. I only call the people I want to come see me. And it said, and Mordecai told them to answer Esther, do not, let me just stop right there. I'm going to put this up here. The queen says, I can't go to him until he raises his royal scepter at you and you have permission to come see him. I can't go see the king. He's going to kill me. And that's how this whole thing goes. She's going to die if she makes an audience with the king. So she's going to have favor. Now, I want you to listen to what Mordecai said. This is where we begin to stir our faith. And Mordecai told them to answer Esther. He said, tell Esther this. Esther, do not think in your heart that you will escape in the king's palace any more than any of the Jews. This is important. Do not think that just because you're the queen, you're going to be spared by this slaughter any more than us. For if you remain completely silent at this time, relief and deliverance will rise for the Jews from another place. This is what Mordecai tells his daughter. Young lady, let's be very clear. If you don't choose to stand up in this moment and be the person that God's called you to be, God's going to find somebody else and you will suffer. But you have this choice. Are you just another pretty face, or are you the person that God called you to be? But you and your father's house will perish. Yet who knows whether you have come to this kingdom for such a time as this moment. Now remember, for the last couple of weeks, we've been talking about courage. This is one of my favorite courageous moments. As a young lady who was picked just because she was another pretty face, shifted from being a Barbie to a Buffy. From just another pretty girl to a girl who had a calling of God on her life. Of faith, of courage, even if it should cost her her life. She knew the right thing to do and she was willing to do it. Was she scared? Absolutely. Was she terrified? Probably. But she was willing to do it. And look at how Esther answered this. And this is so cool. I'm going to have the worship team come up. You ready? Then Esther told them to reply to Mordecai. Dad, go. Gather all the Jews who are present in Shushan and fast for me. Neither eat nor drink for 3 days. Dad, will you have your friends pray for me? Don't eat, don't drink. For days and nights, would you guys pray for me? And my maids, the girls that take care of me, all the followers of our Father God, everybody who shares the faith like me, we will fast likewise. And so I will go to the king, which is against the law. And if I perish, I perish. Now Haman was getting ready to hang Mordecai. All of these things were happening in the back. But here's what was just happened. If you look in your stories, the king can't sleep. He's up all night. It's 2 o'clock in the morning. He can't sleep. And remember the story a minute ago where Mordecai stopped and foiled the assassination project? Now the king can't sleep in the middle of the night, and he thinks, what's the most boring thing that can put me to sleep? And one little guy runs out and he goes, I know. I'll read you the chronicles of the daily events in your community. And he goes, oh my gosh, I cannot think of anything more boring than that. Yes, go get him, bring him in. And imagine this. The little guy comes in, he's got this big book, and he opens it up, and he's just going to start reading to put the king to sleep. And guess which page he turns to? The story of when Mordecai rescued the king. Dear king, once upon a time there were two guys who wanted to kill you. They're so stupid. They're so stupid. I'm so sorry. I don't know why it comes in my head like that. Oh, as I'm doing this, I'm actually thinking of Princess Bride and, anybody want a peanut? And and so he's reading. And Mordecai came out of nowhere and said, Esther, this is what's going on. And you've got to tell the king. And Esther came and told the king. And he saved the day. And the king didn't die. And the king, at 2 o'clock in the morning, can't sleep. And he goes, man, that was a long time ago. Did we ever do anything for Mordecai? And the young man flips through the book. He says, no. We had Haman Palooza. But we never had Mordecai a palooza. And the king just began to think, 2 o'clock in the morning, I wonder what ever happened to that Mordecai. What kind of guy was that Mordecai? He was a Jewish man. Like the Jewish people that were trying to kill? Well, yes, sir, I believe so. I believe that he is a Jewish man. And we're trying to kill him? I mean, we're trying to wipe out the whole group? This was Haman's idea, right? Can you see this story begin to coming together? To where all of a sudden, as this is happening at 2 o'clock in the morning, at the king's palace, we find that Esther begins to have some unusual courage. And in chapter 5, this is where it wraps up. It says, now it happened on the 3rd day that Esther put on her royal robes and stood in the inner courts of the king's palace, here across from the king's house, while the king sat on the royal throne in the royal house facing the entrance of the house. And everything about this story begins to show how specific she began to do everything. You can't just go out there and hope everything just kind of toss it in the air. She became specific, and she, through her prayer time, knew where to put on her royal robes, she's to stand in the inner courts across from and facing. And if you look at when he looked out, everything was so perfect that he saw her and raised the royal scepter and said, come see me. She walked up to the king and said, oh, great king, I have to tell you that the people you're trying to kill are my people, for I am Jewish. And you didn't know I was Jewish, but I am Jewish. And King Mordecai goes, you're Jewish too? It's like everywhere I look, there's these Jewish people. A Jewish man saves my life. I'm married to a Jew and I don't even know it. Where are these people? And I signed the document and gave my signet ring for them to be killed. Who came up with this? And he sends for Haman. And Haman thinks he just wants to pat me on the back again. And he walks in, and the king says, are you the one who came up with this plan? Has this been your plan from the very beginning? And a eunuch raises his hand. And he says, look outside at the gallows. The very gallows where they're going to hang Mordecai. Why don't we hang Haman instead? And they grab him, put a bag over his head, lead Haman outside with his plot to kill the Jews, and he dies. And this whole story is the rescue of the Jewish people. And in Jewish history, Esther is one of the most sacred, wonderful people of faith. They celebrate her. They teach their daughters about her. They teach their sons about her. But the story is a story. I wanted to turn to you and talk about courage. Are you just another pretty face? Or are you that person that under the hardest circumstances can have unusual courage? Each one of us is giving something that seems shallow. And when we put it in the hands of the Lord, it gains depth. It might be beauty. It could be athleticism. It might be intelligence, or possibly affluence. You might have so much money, but do you realize if you don't go to God and ask him what to do with what he's blessed you with, you're just another pretty face. But this story makes us look deeper and realize that behind the scenes, God is working and he's asking you to come be a part of his plan. It could be to rescue somebody's life. Heck, it could be to rescue your own family's life and you don't even realize it. And this lesson of the behind the scenes really makes us take a look at, you could be a Mordecai. You could be a Queen Vashti. Or you could be an Esther. But every one of us has such a time as this moment. You're only on this earth for a small amount of time. And it doesn't mean that life is easy. The reality is you're either a ditz or you're a deep. And I pray in this church we have people that go deep with their faith in God, that they would not be so ditzy to just think that it's just, I just did my thing and I'm here. But listen, in these days especially, unusual courage is not the absence of fear. Unusual courage is not the absence of fear, but it's the mastery of it. And it's not that you get tougher and it's not that you get mouthier. It's that you surrender to the plan that God has for you for such a time as this moment. And the last thing, I just had to throw this in there. I just think it's a question I'd like to see more men ask in this room. Here's the question. Are you an orphan or a queen? And I don't mean a queen. I mean, do you guys ever feel like you're just another orphan? I don't know God's plan for my life. I don't know. Listen, we don't need more queens in this world. We don't need more people to want to be royalty. We need people willing to bow their knees before their God and say, whatever you want me to do, whenever you want me to do it, I will go where you want me to go. I will say what you want me to say. I will be who you want me to be. For Lord, if it honors your kingdom, if it grows your kingdom, if it causes your people to be rescued and known, who have you called me to? And Father, I'm here for such a time as this moment to be the man, to be the woman that you have called me to be. I surrender my life to you. I surrender my heart to you. And Father God, today I declare that I am living to serve you, my Father. That is the courage that I'm asking you to have, called faith.